Just before we begin, can I say this morning we had a feedback from the Local Government Association after the peer review, and it recognised that scrutiny should be more about positive challenge and producing good policy and less dominated by party political debate, which is what I've been saying for a long time, of course. So please, let's continue to try and do that here. I'd like to welcome a number of people, some of whom have not yet joined us. First of all, councillors Pauline Jorgensen and John Halsall will be with us on Teams, and officers, quite a bundle of them: Andy Glencross, Rebecca Brooks, Steve Moore, Graham Ebers, Sally Watkins, Mark Gwynn, who's the new interim head of Insight Strategy and Inclusion, and Gina Humphreys. Have I left anybody off? Oh, thank you. Lovely. Which leads me straight to apologies for absence. Guy Granderson has sent apologies. He's apparently very, very recently, in the last half hour or so, been pinged and so can't come. But as you'll see, he's on screen. So
yes, apologies for that. I have literally been pinged by Test and Trace in the last hour. So I've just booked PCR test. It seems my daughter's been exposed to someone, so the entire household needs it. Excellent fun.
Very grateful that you're joining us online. And there's Pauline, welcome to you too. Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any matters arising? I've got Sarah and then Jim. Okay. Jim first then.
Thank you, Chair. When I get this mask off. On the website, one of the things that was challenged was the fact that the website is just one of our customer contact channels or customer relationship channels, and that they were invited to come, the team were invited to come back and show a number of the other strategies to see how they all fitted together. Mm-hmm. That doesn't seem to be articulated within the minutes.
What would you like them to say then, and where?
That the website is only one of our resident communication channels, and that the team were invited to return at a later date to share with us the other strategies.
Yeah, that is true. Can I see those in favour of amending the minutes in that way, please? Fine, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And then Sarah.
Thank you. There was a couple of points in there. On page 12, second paragraph, this is in relation to the £17 million project and the questioning around the carbon emissions saved through doing it. What's said in the minutes is not actually what was said on the evening. So the minutes say it was confirmed that carbon saving targets would be attached to the project, but the targets had not yet been agreed. What was actually said that there wasn't any commitment made to attach carbon savings because it's very difficult to calculate. So we've never been promised that. So that just needs to be reworded, I'm afraid, Neil.
Well, I'll need to ask Neil for his view on that because I don't remember the exact wording, and I don't know, Neil, whether you've got a record.
I will check the tape and make appropriate changes as necessary.
Fine. I have actually written out verbatim what he said, but maybe for later. And the other one was on page 13 under action tracker report. I actually raised some questions on it which haven't been minuted at all, particularly around the regular meetings with executive and CLT as per the executive scrutiny protocol. It was confirmed in the meeting that these haven't been happening as per the status of the report, and that's not been mentioned at all in the minutes.
Okay. Is everyone happy that we include that then? Because Sarah's right there. Anyone against? That's carried. Thank you.
There was just one other thing. I'm conscious that we had a vote at the beginning of the meeting where the deciding vote was carried by somebody who constitutionally is ineligible to vote. So we should really be taking that vote again in this meeting.
Any comments? Neil?
As we have some different members here from that previous vote, can I suggest I do a very short paper to the next meeting, which sets out the pros and cons, and then members can vote at that meeting?
I'd certainly be happy with that.
I think we should simply take the vote again, which is what Sarah originally proposed. I'd just like to ask whether Guy would be able to vote now that he's having to abide by government recommendations to stay at home. Okay. Well, I mean, I don't think we need a paper. We had a motion, and I understand Sarah's point that a deputy exec member shouldn't have been a substitute to this committee. I accept that, and that perhaps we should take the vote again now.
Is that a formal proposal, Alison?
Yes.
Is there a seconder for that? There's no seconder. Ah, yes, I've seen one. Seen two people now. Thank you. Norman.
Yeah, I'm not sure on what basis we're saying that he wasn't eligible to vote. He was put in that position by a vote at council in May this year. The thing that Sarah was referring to was several years ago. So I think you could argue that the more recent vote certainly trumps the older one. So it would be useful to get officers' sort of view of that, but there's certainly an argument that that's the more recent appointment.
If I can help to clarify that a little bit, Norman, the person in question is a deputy executive member, and Sarah's quite right. We did pass a resolution a while ago, 2 or 3 years ago, to say that exec members couldn't sit on this committee due to some oversight, and whom I know not, but on the substitutes list of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee, his name was still there. That's now been dealt with, and the name has been taken off, so that won't happen again. I don't know whether Neil's got anything further he wants to add to that.
No, I think that is accurate, Chairman. But as I said earlier, it may be sensible to take that into account and to do a very brief paper next time, and then members can vote confidently that everything is above board.
Well, I have got a recommendation put forward by Alison, which has been seconded, so I do have to take that. So Alison, would you kindly repeat what your recommendation was, please?
I recommend that we take a vote properly constituted this evening on the motion proposed in the previous meeting, that the current format, i.e. not naming individual members, continue.
Okay, right. May I see those in favour of that particular motion? Okay, those against? In favour, 5 against. Okay, thank you very much anyway, Sarah, for clarifying that. And as you know, the person's name is now no longer on the substitute list, so I don't think that will happen again. Thank you. Right, may I see those in favour of accepting the minutes of the previous meeting as a correct record now then? Those in favour? Thank you very much. Passed unanimously.
Sorry, Chair. The motion that I proposed that we just voted on, was that passed?
Yes. Yes, it was passed 6 in favour and 5 against. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Public questions? I gather from Neil there are none. And no member. Rachel?
Sorry, it's not a declaration of interest as such, but I've recently joined the anti-property working group.
Fine, good for you. Thank
Yes,
you.
I've got the same declaration to make as Rachel.
Super. Thank you very much indeed, both of you. We'll record that. Are there any member questions? No member questions. Right, then let's move straight on to item 50, the recovery strategy update. which is really to consider progress that's been made, to note the progress and the key delivery achievements. The progress report is pages 20 to 28 in effect. So those, I think, are the ones that we'll need to be looking at mainly. And I'm going, because there are 9 of them, I'm going to ask you if you've got any comments or questions, that we deal with them one page at a time so we can all follow easily. And Graham, welcome. I believe you're going to present this. Thank you.
Yes, I am, Chairman, and good evening, everyone. Yes, the recovery strategy was approved at Executive a little while ago, and that recovery strategy sits in the context of the Council's plan, the overall Council plan, and they are the pillars that are identified are those things that we need to be most thoughtful and mindful of, having gone through the impact of COVID. So the approach is really through the delivery is to get a sense check, get the progress identified every quarter, and that is presented to our corporate leadership team. And I fully expected us to also come back to overview and scrutiny to present progress as well. So what I've put together for you is our first 2 quarters actions that have been undertaken against that strategy agreed at Executive. I would and the governance is, as I said, is a report. I'm the sponsor that reports to CLT, and we work in a hub and spoke way, which is we centrally collect the intelligence through all the work that's going on around the directorates, around the rest of the council. So there's all sorts of working groups in place that fill in a standard template, return back, and then we coordinate, take CLT, and then of course onto a committee like overview and scrutiny. I would want to stress, because of the nature of recovery covers all of the councils, the breadth of the council, I would not profess to be an expert in the detail of all, and indeed in some cases the detail will be quite immense. For example, the health and well-being strategy is an enormous document that covers a whole host of things. So the reference of one has been developed is obviously a headline, and under there is an awful lot of detail which I wouldn't be able to answer. I think also the committee should recognise that there's other overview and scrutiny committees, for example HOSC, and there'll be one for children's. So I think it's important that we recognise that, and I would suggest that we locate that scrutiny or interest and inquiry in those appropriate committees, as opposed to maybe a sense of the committees stepping on each other's toes. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm happy to take questions and answer what I can, but I did ask, in the knowing that this was a council-wide initiative and I could not be the holder of the intelligence of all the council's activities, I did ask for questions in advance, and I understand I haven't received any in advance. Regardless, I would do my best to answer whatever you want to throw at me.
Okay, we don't expect you to be omniscient or even omnipotent. Are there any questions on page 20? Norman, then Rochelle, then Rachel, then Sarah, and then Jim.
Right, thank you, Graham. I was very interested, obviously, in getting the Dinton Activity Centre at COP26, which is obviously great news for that development. It's a really nice facility. Have we had any feedback since COP26? Anything that was said, or any feedback at all?
I haven't received any feedback directly, but I can say that we had to submit a a bid, and we went through a number of hurdles for the LGA to accept us as a site of worthy note and display. So to have made it on that stand was quite a feat, but I'm not aware of any feedback following the event. But it will be good to chase up and hear from the LGA what the interest was expressed on the event.
Okay, Norman, thank you. And Rochelle?
Okay. Are you saying reflect the general green agenda in council policies? 10 schools have been retrofitted. Why isn't photovoltaic panels put on the schools? And what's been done in Chute End? I don't see any LED lights above us here right offhand. And I haven't heard of any insulation measures or heating upgrades or anything like that happening at Chute End. Since this is the council's main headquarters, shouldn't we also be doing all of that here as well? And putting up photovoltaic panels somewhere to power some of this so we don't have as much carbon footprint?
Yeah, I can say that there is a program of works that's agreed in the capital program for our energy officer. I'm sure you're aware who he is, Ian Goff, to go around all of the council's buildings and make those climate emergency adjustments where he can. I'm pretty sure there was an awful lot of work undertaken in terms of the LED fittings in Chute End. I'm not suggesting absolutely everything's done. I think one of the issues with the solar panels on Chute End was the roofing infrastructure, but again, I can check that out. But I know that there is an ongoing program of retrofitting and upgrade across all council properties in that way, and indeed some schools have had solar panels. So I can get an update from Ian around the works on Chute End, but I know he has done quite a considerable amount of work at Chute End, but I can find out if there's any further works in the pipeline.
Is there anything that's going to be done for reinforcing the roof so we can put solar panels up there, or putting solar panels in the car park or something like this?
Graham?
Okay, we're obviously moving to quite a level of detail here. As for solar panels in the council's car park, I suspect the fact that it's taking up space might be an issue, but I can get back on that. Well, actually, Andy's here, so he might have a view if he's listening. Yes, in terms of structural interventions on the roof, I can check that out as part of where Ian is on his upgrades around Chute End, including the roof, and whether the structural issues are financially prohibitive or there's other reasons that prevents solar panel retrofit. But Andy, I can see, has helpfully jumped to the fore to pick up these solar panels on car parking question.
Before you jump in there, Andy, can I just say to Guy, I have been alerted to the fact that you want to speak as well. Okay, Andy.
Just to update you, Rochelle, that we did look at making sure the structure of the Winnersh Park and Ride deck was suitable to put solar panels on top of if we chose to do it. And there are, I think, some solar panels above parking spaces at the DAC building. It's part of that project as well.
And Chute End?
Chute End, I haven't got any planned at Chute End yet. It's about whether you put the structures in to support them. Effectively, you've got to put a metal structure above the parking spaces to then support the panels above the cars.
Thank you. Graham, earlier you mentioned council properties. Does that include social housing?
Certainly HRA are being considered for the climate emergency interventions that can be enacted, and because it will be over the breadth of the properties, almost 3,000, obviously there will be quite significant schemes, but the answer is yes. The council housing stock is definitely being looked at in the context of climate emergency interventions.
Super, thank you very much. Rachel.
Thank you. Now, I appreciate this is an update to a strategy, but I wanted to understand why climate change is listed as a sort of #1 priority in a report about COVID recovery. And as we've already noted, the one sort of notable success that's been drawn out is a carbon neutral building. And I just don't understand why that is relevant specifically to COVID recovery. I mean, there is one point in there that I would concede to do with maintaining the lockdown benefits that we had. But even if you concede that point, actually, I think the other actions in there are actually quite vague. It's vague references to the Climate Emergency Action Plan, for example. Although that plan is crucial, the success of it is obviously crucial, and we'd all agree that it was. I don't understand why it's sort of relevant to the COVID recovery. And actually, more generally, I would say about the whole report, the action points aren't very specific and they're not very measurable. So, continue to support the management of COVID-19. How would we, as a committee, scrutinise whether that had been actually met and what the impact of it was? So, if you could answer those sort of two themes, that would be great.
I must say, Rachel, I have exactly the same question in my mind as to what climate change had to do with its conduct, but maybe Graham can answer that and your other question.
Well, the first one's quite simple. It was agreed by executive that this was the climate emergency strategy made up of these pillars. What I would say is in trawling council recovery plans across the country, almost every one I looked at included climate emergency as a pillar for recovery out of COVID, which I think is certainly to some extent, as Rachel said, was for us to use it as an opportunity to exploit the benefits that have been presented through the impact of COVID and the ability to use technology, and also the fact that it will be a continually pressing issue and challenge and should be top of our priority. And therefore, when I introduced this paper, I said these are the most important things that the council need to be thinking about. Climate emergency, I believe, should be one of them. Other councils have used that approach as well, to include climate emergency as one of their key focuses coming out of recovery, or in terms of their recovery. But more importantly, it's the strategy that's agreed against executive. So I wasn't intending to rewrite the strategy. I was simply updating progress against it. As for the granularity or the specificity of the actions, as I said, this is a huge, this is almost all things that the council's doing. So I did put that as a marker in introducing this. This is intended to provide a kind of a sense of, and for us to answer questions, or me to be able to answer questions that arise, but also to signpost or to be the beginning of a deeper dive of exploration. But I to produce a very detailed update covering all of those pillars would be a huge document, and I'm not sure all of that should be in the remit of this committee, because other ONS committees are set up to scrutinise other parts of the council. So I took it as a corporate-wide contextual update as opposed to a massive deep dive. So, for example, I think the conf was referred to in Rachel. So the HOSC Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee will do, if they haven't already, will be making very in-depth inquiries in those areas.
Thank you. Sarah.
Thank you. I actually wanted to start by just commenting on the overall document as it stands, and then use some examples from page 20, sort of reinforce that. I just wanted to say firstly, I mean, obviously the council did an absolutely fantastic job during the early stages of the pandemic. You know, the care home task force, the one front door system. That was, you know, a really good example of local government at its best. And then I read this, and I've actually written down the same word here that Rachel used, vague. It was sort of undervalued, all of that, and I feel there might be some missed opportunities potentially. So looking at this first one, I mean, the green recovery was something that, you know, was drawn out of looking at those opportunities. What we actually have here in general is a report that looks at the stuff the council's doing anyway, and I was expecting a report on specifics to recovering and using opportunities from COVID. That's what I expected. You know, so continuing to deliver the actions in our climate emergency action plan, that was something that was happening anyway. So the only thing on this page that relates to either recovery or using an opportunity is continue to maximise the short-term environmental benefits of lockdown restrictions based on data and insights. So what I'd really like to see and understand is, okay, so how, what, you know, and none of the progress update lists anything. It's all about stuff the council was doing anyway, irrespective of COVID. So, and I don't know if you have the answers to this. I appreciate this doesn't fall under your directorate, but that's the kind of thing I was expecting, certainly in this. And yeah, it all seemed a bit vague. I mean, are you able to fill us in on what is actually being done? Actually, you know, looking at maximising those short-term environmental benefits and helping with the green recovery?
Graham?
Okay, just initially the broader response to the point is the strategy set out all the measures of success, and the purpose of this is to give an update against those measures of success set out year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. So in many ways, the tram lines are there. And in that strategy, it did identify that there was an awful lot of work that was already ongoing. So some of that may even have started before COVID, but it was still relevant to recovery. Some of it may have started during COVID, so was just continuing again what was already in train, but was seen appropriate to COVID. The data and insight bit is for us, it is intended to keep checking, horizon scanning and checking the here and now in terms of are our measures of success, are our intentions still valid? And in most places, the answer is that data and insight is telling us that there's no change to our initial understanding of the problem. So those problems or issues are still the right ones, and it's still appropriate to address in the right way. An example of where data and insight has told us that the initial premise was wrong, an example in those sheets is in employment, whereby we were going to have a static site at Shoot End, and following our understanding of the incidence of employment, the nature of it in terms of the groups affected, and the difficulties it would present by just putting a single site, we've created a mobile offer that will go out and reach out to the community, and will target those areas. So it tends to be the more older of the employed that the incidence of unemployment is felt greater, as opposed to the very young. So that was some of the intelligence that informed the new intervention. I will continue to accept, of course, because by the nature of this report, it doesn't have all the specific levels of detail. So for example, all of those things that are set out in the health and wellbeing report, I used that already as an example, is just a one line, and it's not the whole of the health and wellbeing report. So I think it would be about really where you want deeper levels of information and providing those, or indeed if it's a case of signposting other ONS committees to explore particular lines of inquiry where they belong to other ONS committees.
So, I mean, looking specifically at the green recovery, it's something we've actually asked for a couple of times at this committee and we've not had it yet. I would be really interested to understand, you know, so it's talking about continuing to maximise short-term environmental benefits, that the wording implies that some of that work's already been done, that there have been benefits that have happened because of lockdown and we've done something about it, but there's nothing in this report under progress to identify that, and actually understanding specifically the green recovery, not what we're already doing, but how we've maximised those opportunities, is something we've been waiting for in this committee. Is that something we can see?
Yeah, this climate emergency belongs to this agenda, so that in a climate emergency update, without doubt, we can bring a greater spotlight on those things that are identified there. What I would say is all the things that we're achieving in the climate emergency pillar will be those set out in our climate emergency action plan. So it's in many ways it's a restatement of that, but identifying particularly what's gone on in the last 2 quarters.
Neil,
Thank you.
Neil would like to pop in then, so.
If I just try and clarify the background, Graham was asked to bring a very high level paper here, and then with the view that the committee would then decide specific issues it wanted to come back in more detail, we would fit those into the programme later into the municipal year. So that, I think that was the context within which this report was commissioned.
Thank you, Neil. That is helpful. So if anyone's got any suggestions of things they'd like to bring back, maybe they could put them forward. Next person is Jim.
Thank you. Can I just say I quite like the style of this report. I understand some of the comments behind, but the fact that whenever we have presentations on the climate emergency, it gets a little bit technical for an old person like me. It's good to see bullet points, but it would be even better now to see the actions against each of those bullet points as we go forward. So I like the concept there. COVID has done a number of things. It's given us impacts, which we need to recover from. It's given us benefits, opportunities, and lessons. And some of those things I can't see in this report. I think one of the good things that we did as a council and as individuals is we had a much more collaborative, agile way of working throughout COVID. Some of the silo working that I personally thought was there before when people took additional responsibilities. And I think those are the things that are out of COVID that we should be trying to carry forward. And I can't quite see those in here at this moment in time. I think that's where the big opportunity lies for us. I would like to see, carrying on from Neil's point, the maximise the short-term environmental benefits of lockdown restrictions, etc. That for me is the key stream out of climate emergency for this, because those are where the benefits of COVID were most profoundly seen. And I want to make sure we maintain those benefits as far as we can. And that includes things such as encouraging home working and reducing travel, etc., which again, I can't see.
Any comment? Anything you want to say about that, Graham?
Yes, I completely agree, and I guess I can only reiterate what I said by way of introduction, and Neil helpfully and thankfully clarify this was really meant as almost like a high level introduction into the progress to explore further where you want future exploration. I could, without doubt, Jim, that there's loads of benefits, opportunities, lessons, massive amount of engagement going on in that arena, both with young children's forums, businesses and businesses sharing us facilitating businesses sharing best practice, the whole introduction of the new virtual world into our Workplace Reimagined project, which is recognizing we'll be on a smaller footfall, we'll be able to work in this type of way with half of us tuned in by IT and half of us present or variations of, keeping cars off the road. I think you mentioned silo working. I mean, that's in another pillar of our resources, so how we are, our people. And we know that some of those cross-council ways of responding to COVID and indeed recovering from COVID, they were immense. And there were some things I think came out in the peer review as well. But certainly from my perspective, it's providing incredible opportunities for new ways of working, which we must embrace, and we are. And it's created really strong behavioural change. And I've seen departments and directors come together and really pull for each other at gold meetings and outside gold meetings in terms of responding to this crisis in a way I've never seen before. And absolutely, we need to keep and build upon all those good things, which includes how well we've developed working relationships with the voluntary sector, which features very strong in that conf pillar, but also many other things that we do. So yeah, that whole connecting both inside and outside is been hugely facilitated through the crisis of COVID, and we must learn and build from there, which we intend to do.
And brilliant, and that's exactly what I would like to see in this recovery report. Those actions we're doing to do that, because I think that's our real big opportunity to make a real big difference very quickly. Thank you for the work you've done.
Thank you. Just to say, the Workplace Reimagined is referenced in the papers towards the last pillar. Just so you know, it's just all the detail that sits behind it isn't included, because that would be a large piece of work, which you could, of course, look at under a spotlight. But if I can put all the details behind that and every other project, we just wouldn't be able to do business. So I think this is given to you in the spirit of a highlight, an overview, by definition superficial to some degree, but to provoke where your greater interests may be, to bring back a more detailed spotlight in future.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
And now, Guy.
Thank you, Chair. A very quick one, actually, because I had a couple of residents query with me about solar panels on their own recently. And it is a request to basically, can we please put the guidance regarding solar panels for planning permission purposes somewhere a bit more easy to find on the website? Because currently the only thing I can find is national guidance. I know this is a very specific point, but if we're going to be reflecting the green agenda on all council policies, having visibility of that to residents is a key factor on that. So it's just a thought that came to me whilst helping residents in the last few days about this, because it isn't very clear on the council website whether they are permitted development or not. So I just want to make it easier for residents to put up solar panels where applicable.
Thank you, guys. Good point. Any comment from you, Graham, on that, or is it just something to accept?
Yeah.
Back to the website, people.
I'll check it out. Something I'd like to do myself.
Snap.
Okay. Thank you. Paul.
Thank you, Pauline. Yeah, I agree with what Sarah, Rachel and Jim have said already. I found it very vague reading through this, so I won't go through those points again. But you have put something in here which I sort of like to drill down a bit further into, and that was the 54 new electric vehicle charging points which have been installed. And there's a paper going to exec next week on electric charge points. So these particular ones that have been installed already, where have they been funded from? Where are they located? Are they mapped somewhere so people can then go and find them? And what contract do they sit under?
Series of questions, Graham.
Yeah, thanks, Paul, for sparing me the detailed questions.
I'm sure your man on the beach will help you.
I'm hoping it will, Andy.
I think I'll have to come back to you on the detail of that, Paul. There are, I think, from what I gather, the latest information I have is there are 68 EV charge points across the borough. They're not all on council-owned car parks or on council-owned sites. Some of them are private. They're on lots of different contracts because it's a very immature market, and there are lots of different approaches out there at the moment. So if you want me to give you an actual detailed answer about where they all are and who owns them and what contracts they're on, I can probably come back to you with that at some time in the future, but I can't do it now.
What about the mapping question, and where people can find out where they are? That's a really good point.
I believe it depends on which ones they are, Pauline. There are a number. For instance, there's a whole load of EV charging points at the Sindlesham Hotel. They're all Tesla ones, and they're mapped on the Tesla app. Various different apps you can get to find charge points. I'm not sure which ones are on which, to be honest with you.
So we don't have a map for the whole borough and say which one is which.
There is a map called ZapMap where you can find the vast majority. But what I was alluding to here, there's 54. It says 54 new electric charge points, and the answer coming back from Andy, it appears to be these have not been funded by Wokingham Borough Council. These have been funded by private companies, so they're separate contracts. Is that what you're telling me?
No, I'm saying I need to give you the full detail. My understanding is there are 68 across the borough. Some of them are borough council, some of them are private. If you want me to give you that kind of detail, I'll have to come back to you with a written answer, Paul.
And it might be worth mentioning the ones in the country park.
Yeah, there are some in the country parks. There are some at Cantley. There are some, there are some in our car parks. There are some on private land. I need to, if you want some real detail, Paul, I'll come back to you with a written answer.
Yeah, it just appeared from this high level that those 54 have been installed by WBC and paid for by WBC.
But
that may or may not be the case.
I can't give you the detail on the numbers, but we have certainly installed that number of ones in the recent years. So.
Andy, I'd also be interested to get that information, so maybe you could email it to all of us. That'd be really worth doing. Thank you. And carry on.
Yeah, if I just come back, Andy just said in recent years, but I thought this was a first quarter and second quarter update, so it's in the last 6 months.
I'd have to check that. I don't know the detail. So
I've just got Sarah who wants to come back. And then we'll move on.
It was just a point of clarification on the mapping of EV charges. You get them on an app, nothing to do with the council.
Okay, thank you. We have strayed onto some of the other pages already, but is there anything on page 21 anyone wants to raise? If not, then let's move to page 23, the education and development for children and young people. Sarah?
Thanks. I guess this is something that maybe Children's Services, every Scrutiny may want to look at, but I certainly would be interested in Scrutiny looking at children, sort of early years. Obviously, we're really affected by lockdown, sort of preschool going into reception in year one. I certainly know the head teacher at our school was really concerned about their development. But I'd like to know what the council and Children's Services are doing to help with that, and also children who need to catch up, children from low income families who struggled. There's nothing in here at the moment, so I think that should be you know, two key lines of inquiry that we should be looking at and understanding how the council is supporting. There's two quite serious issues.
Any comment on that, Graham?
Well, only maybe to pick up on Sarah's initial point that it may well be the best way to deal with this is to notify the children's overview and scrutiny of two concerns that have risen through looking at the recovery strategy in the whole, and for them to be mindful of exploring those further.
Maybe Neil, you could pick that up for us. Norman, then I'll come to Rachel.
Yeah, the Children's Scrutiny Committee's got a review of the early years service in January. So that would be an appropriate question to address to that. Okay.
Thank you very much. Rachel.
Thank you. It's just a quick point that there's no mention of the virtual school in here, and I would have thought that would be really important, as you know, children in care are likely to be disproportionately affected by COVID. So I would expect there to be a link to that and the support that they give and their needs in terms of, you know, COVID recovery.
I think Norman can pick that up as well as chairman of the Children's. Okay, thank you very much, Rachel. Good point. Is
Guy online.
sorry, that Guy. Guy.
Thank you, Chair. Although Rachel did actually take one of my two questions just then, because I was about to ask about the virtual school. The other aspect that occurred to me was in regards to effectively any future planning in regards to if we have to go back to a situation like kind of like what I'm in right now. Do we have sufficient capacity within the various teams that are supporting children and young people to basically support things remotely? As I know there's been criticism in the past about there being, when we were in lockdown previously, of basically things just stopping. And do we have the capacity in the council to basically support the teams to basically deliver some of these aspects virtually, whereas previously everything just stopped? That's the only one I want to know, and maybe that needs to come back in the January meeting with Children's Overview and Scrutiny. I just want to know that detail.
Graham, have you any comment on that, or really just a point to make?
Well, just in general, and it links to the COMF, so the funding through the Community Outbreak Management Framework, and our gold response is there's a Children's Services Task Force, and that task force is extremely active. Obviously, Carol and Sal are instrumental in leading that, and they're extremely active in supporting schools and helping them with all the COVID interventions. They were also, that task force was very active in terms of getting IT to those who didn't have IT, and supporting schools with virtual learning. So I can only answer at the high level that this area, amongst many areas, this council put an awful lot of energy into getting the best outcomes in a very difficult period of time, and we still have that infrastructure in place. Obviously, Carol and Sal would be able to answer it in a much more detailed way than I.
Sarah?
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to pick up on that actually, because obviously Carol's about to leave, and Sal's actually on a long period of sabbatical or something. So actually, two of our key people throughout all this aren't actually going to be with us as part of that recovery. So I guess there might be some concern about that sort of continuity, because I mean they've done a fantastic job through this, but obviously there's going to be change in personnel. Yeah, I was actually quite surprised that Sal was off for so long. Just got it on an out of office one day. So I guess the question related to that then is how are we going to ensure that the great work that has been done is going to continue with such senior staff movement?
Graham, do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, obviously it's quite a detailed, it's a question of detail, but I have no doubt that Carol and Sal been very responsible and passionate about this agenda would ensure that the two replacements to each, one's already in situ, one's to be onboarded reasonably soon, will ensure that there is appropriate handover and continuity planning in all of this. And I can't speak for both because one I don't know particularly well, but I know one is an extremely experienced in the position that they're coming into. So I would expect them to have gone through some quite similar challenges and of course will benefit from the handover as well.
Thank you. Right, page 23. Sarah?
Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on the first bullet point under progress update. It says recovery activities for ensuring resilient communities and sustainable services are focused on working directly with community-based organisations and providing high-quality spaces for residents to use within the borough. This includes working with town and parish councils and delivering enhanced community facilities in Shinfield, Twyford and Wokingham. The Twyford facility being referred to there, is that the library that has now had the funding halted? Or is it another facility that's being enhanced?
Graham, do you know?
Could I actually introduce Dina at this point, who's done an awful lot of work in this area to pick up the, thank you Dina, to pick up the specific but also the more general work that's been going on pretty feverishly over the past 2 quarters in this kind of community space. Dina.
You can, Graham, except these are probably the one bit I'm not knowledgeable about, if I'm honest. This one's more of a Mr. Redfern question, especially around the library. I can take your question away, Sarah, and I can come back to you with a response. But it would be something we'd need further detail from Mark on, is if we are specifically talking about the Twyford project here, the Twyford Library project.
Yeah. Do we know if there are any other community facilities in Twyford that we're looking at being enhanced?
Not that I'm aware of, I have to say.
So the likelihood is this is Twyford Library that isn't now being enhanced.
Oh yeah, I can clarify that. That it's not about Twyford Library not being enhanced. The issue about Twyford Library was the project was paused pending some work to make it more affordable.
Okay, do you actually have an idea of when we're likely to see that back in progress again?
I'm expecting, obviously this would need to be clarified, so it's only my expectations, something early in next year.
Are we talking calendar year, financial year, municipal year?
Calendar.
Thank you.
Thank you. Page 24. And page 25. Norman.
Yeah, I mean, related to page 25, I just wondered what your feedback you're getting from local businesses now and what concerns any of the local businesses still have that we're able to help them with.
Oh, sorry, Chairman, should I?
No, I was going to ask you to come back on that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, I think it is worth recognising there was a hugely impressive response to businesses, which wasn't just about transacting the grant. It was in, say, our business economic development area as well, led by Rianne, around reaching out, contacting and arranging engagement sessions as well. So there's an ongoing dialogue around what the business needs are, and they're very varied. Some businesses are doing extremely well, and others are not doing so well and are struggling. Some are businesses that we have very direct relationships with, for example, town centre regeneration area, and some that we have a less direct relationship with. So it's an ongoing dialogue with all of these businesses at different levels of interaction depending on their need and circumstance. And we are taking a very, and of course in terms of collecting business rates as well, we're taking a very compassionate approach. We need to ensure we do all we can to collect money that can be paid, but we're also very quick to explore alternative repayment plans, or even we've given financial relief over and above government grants as well in areas. So there are some businesses that are still struggling, and we're doing what we can to support. There's obviously a whole community of businesses across the borough in different places, and it's just about having the resource, that extra resource there, which this recovery plan has put in place to make sure the reaching out to these businesses and the collection of intelligence and the response is as effective as and targeted as it can be.
Okay, thank you. Sam?
Thank you, Chair. In regards to the 1 million in funding secured to develop offer for rough sleepers, this is great to hear this. It'd be really interesting to see what's actually been used for the money, and is this going to be an ongoing funding thing for future?
Graham?
Yeah, I think that's something we need to come back in more detail on. Obviously, it was fantastic the fact that we secured the money. Some of this was we had to make bids for, and we did extremely well in the COVID response about we were down to one rough sleeper very early on. So very early on we had addressed all the problem that we could address, because the one rough sleeper that we were down to was resistant for receiving any assistance from us. So that was extremely successful. So it would be, I think that would be a good area for this committee to see where we are on that homelessness project now, and what the plans are for the future, and how affordable those plans are.
Thank you, Graham.
Thank you. Right, page 26 now, a really important one. Stimulate job creation and skills. Any questions? Rachel?
Thank you. I just wanted to pick up on the paragraph about claimant rates that you've got there, because there's nothing there about the cut in universal credit, £20 a week. We know, I think it says there somewhere that half the people claiming universal credit started claiming it during the pandemic. So we know that cut's going to have a big impact on people in Woking. So I guess the question is, has the council thought about or sort of modelled the impact of that change, and how the council should respond to that?
Yeah, I think the key to this is about us working with as much intelligence as we can, which we hold some, but also we know the voluntary sector hold an awful lot more. So this will be very much working, and it links into the next item, very much working with the Hardship Alliance and those that can inform the Hardship Alliance around those who are really struggling, and how we can intervene in the best possible way between us.
Okay. And That's importantly, page 27, developing our people and new ways of working. Any questions, Rebecca?
Thank you. It was interesting to see about Wellbeing Wednesday, Graham. I could do with one of those myself at home, really. Can you tell me a little bit more about it and how it's working here for the staff and ways of working?
Yeah, probably I'll answer in the broader way. I think certainly well-being, and again, this was something that was reported back on from the peer review, is recognised to be increasingly on our leadership radar. So the well-being of staff is really important, and obviously was very difficult for some staff, much more than others, being having to be at home and the impact of lockdown. So discussions around mental health, training around mental health, support. So there's additional support facilities, and there's various comings together that are organised as well. Sort of touchdown, touch base, sort of arrangements, and I can talk about specific. So at one leadership team, we had a whole checklist of what managers should be, talking about. Let's talk about mental health. Let's bring it. Let's socialise it. It's nothing to be ashamed of, and it's also recognising that people need help to take a break and not feel overwhelmed in the virtual world. You run from one team's meeting to another, and of course you may not have that social interaction in a way, the support network that some staff, particularly those that dealt with say very awkward or disturbing interactions with customers or childcare issues, those type of things. So a massive infrastructure's been put in place, soft, some hard, but a lot of it's soft. And well-being of staff is very fundamental to when I talked about the workplace reimagined. And when I talk about well-being of staff, I can also expand it to inclusiveness, recognizing the importance of difference and the importance of inclusion. So the equalities agenda as well. So all of those things we're particularly mindful of, having gone through COVID, some directly related through COVID, others is, well, we really need to up our game here anyway. And I think staff well-being, the cultural issues, the equality issues, they're all paramount considerations in our Workplace Reimagined programme, which is not about the asset, although the environment's important, is not about the IT, although the IT to do your job's important. It's about the workforce of the future and good leadership and being mindful of those important things, which include staff welfare. I noticed Tina's come up, so I can introduce Tina to Seth.
Tina, come in.
So I am a mental health first aider and I take part in Wellbeing Wednesday. So I'm one of the 450 plus staff which the local authority had trained as mental health first aiders, and Wellbeing Wednesday and Wednesday Community Resident Wellbeing Cafe is exactly what it says. Is it's a safe place for members of the mental health cohort or any member of staff to come along and have a conversation with us or talk about general things. Sometimes we talk in depth about how we're going to increase our mental health profiles, talk about how we're going to do different projects, or how we're going to talk about specific things which are affecting the work and staff force and those kind of things. Sometimes we talk about chicken nuggets. And And it really is that. And it is that safe place where we see where the conversation takes us. It's an hour every 2 weeks, and it just gives staff the ability to also recognise other staff outside of their working areas. We all know that we work agilely more and more because of the way that we work now, but we also still do work in our teams and cohorts. And I certainly know I've met lots of great people through doing my mental health first aid work and being part of Wellbeing Wednesday Cafe.
Thank you very much for doing that, Dina. This was one of the areas this morning that the peer review said was one of our big strengths, actually, the way we look after our staff. We're really pleased to hear that. Jim.
Thank you, Chair. Mental health, Wellbeing Wednesdays. We took the trouble for some members to be trained as mental health first aiders. Don't forget we're part of this as well. Use us. One volunteer. And on the inclusion part of it, I'm aware, because I talked to the digital teams and the customer service teams on a number of things of what's aimed for discovery and engagement phase of the workplace reimagined. I think that's probably the most important thing that this council is going to do. Again, a request, include members, because we should all be one team in this.
Okay. I'd like to endorse what Jim said at the beginning there, because I did that mental first aid course as well. That'd be useful, that reminder, Jim. And I've now got Rachel.
You seem to be talking about new ways of working, but you're still talking about returning to the office. Now, what about work-life balance, climate change effects of working from home rather than working from an office without having to commute, family life balance, all these kind of things that are positive from this, rather than making people come into the office 5 days a week, maybe 2 days a week is more than sufficient to actually provide all the services and to give the people who work for you, who work for the council, an ability to have a life as well. What's being done about that?
Yes, what Rochelle articulated there is exactly what we have in mind. So there will be some staff that need to be present, and 5 days a week maybe, and they'll be predominantly in the care services, I suspect. There will be, on the other extreme, there will be those that can work 5 days from home and maybe only occasionally come in where there's an important reason for face-to-face team meetings or meet and greet new people or what have you. And then there'll be all those in between that may come in twice, 3 times or 4 times. And that's exactly what we recognise the new ways of working to be. It will be a hybrid model, but also we as a council run a very eclectic mix of services, and some of those lend themselves to being able to work from home almost entirely, and others not so much or not at all. So yes, it's completely recognising that, and I would say we already had smart working in place, which many staff enjoyed, which allowed them to work from home from maybe on set days a week or what have you. So actually, because we'd introduced smart working before COVID, we were ahead of the game, and it meant that we were, in terms of technology, other than having to extend bandwidth, we were mobilised in a full home working environment much quicker than any other council I'm aware of. Others were busy running around getting the laptop technology and the infrastructure in place. So yes, we have for some time been very mindful of work-life balance, and that will continue into the workplace reimagined considerations.
Thank you. And then lastly, page 28. Jim.
Sorry, it's me again. we talk about communications and engagement on this page. I think there's a lot of lessons we can learn from how we managed our communications during COVID. I realise it was a unique situation, but for once we had residents seeking and demanding our communication rather than us trying to get them to read it and to understand it. So I think there's some lessons there that I think should be brought back in this recovery plan. How are we going to keep some of that interest and the language changes that we use to make things a lot easier to understand? And the second part of this is decision making. We made some really quick decisions and good decisions in a collaborative way during COVID. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank all those that were involved in making the decision with regards to releasing into care homes without testing, because I realise that decision pushed the boundaries. I understand that it pushed the boundaries, and in my opinion, it saved lives. So if you could pass on my thanks to everyone involved in that, I'd be grateful.
Jim, I believe we were the first council in the country to make that insistence, and the government followed us. Glad you raised that. Is there anything else? If not, then let's move back to the recommendation, which is on page 15. The committee is requested to note progress in delivery of the strategy and the key achievements to date. Can I see a seconder for that if I propose it? Thank you, Jim. And those in favour of accepting that recommendation? Seven. And those against? Those abstaining? 4. Okay, thank you very much. Right, and now then we move to the extra page, the anti-poverty strategy, which is on separate sheets there. Now we are requested to note it and consider whether we'll have another input in 6 months' time, essentially. Is somebody going to speak on this amongst the officers? Who's that, Graham?
That would be me, Chairman.
Okay, off you go then.
Yeah, there's no Sally or Mark tonight. Given the formative nature of where we are, I thought I'd let them stand down this evening. Obviously, they'll be available for future meetings if we want to delve deeper into particular areas. So yes, the paper's written. As I stated, it's a very formative stage. There's, in terms of governance, there's a members anti-poverty group that I think they've met a couple of times, and they all continue to meet I think it's every 6 weeks. On that group is, so there's representations of all your parties. So there's John Horsall, John Kaiser, Laura Blumenthal, Alison Swaddle, Rachel Bishop Firth, Carl Duran, and Rachel Burgess. So that's an important component of this, is that we're continually updating and seeking input where we can from a political perspective, because this is a really important agenda to get right. I'm here as the sponsor of the programme, so again, fairly involved at a fairly high level, but an important level, because it's important that we show that we take it seriously around the council. So it's important that there's someone there to make connections, overcome barriers if they emerge, or call out priorities in terms of workloads across the council and all that sort of thing. We are, in terms of poverty, it's a small and fairly new team. Individuals include, Emma's probably one of the central points of contact that you may be aware of, but there's so Emma is the key dedicated resource. and Mark, as you referenced earlier, Pauline, is a key support to this agenda as well as Sally. Some of the things that have been taking the time of the early meetings of the group may sound a bit trifling, but actually are really important in the context of this agenda. And that's about getting the definition right and understanding the groups and getting the language right as well. So there's been quite a lot of work in describing those groups as set out in the paper, the 3 groups, and the definition. Language is massively important, not just from our perspectives of that we think, but the voluntary sector are really strong on we've got to get the language right for it to be inclusive and not conveying blame or anything like that. The voluntary sector is vital in this, and we are working tenaciously with the voluntary sector to try to start to get together what I would call the very beginning of an evolving strategy. So this will be very much a work in progress all the way through. We will keep evolving. We will refresh the strategy every year. We will keep refreshing on the actions, and we'll keep working primarily, but not exclusively, with the voluntary sector in this through this hardship alliance that includes the CAB, First Days, who focus on the young, Age UK with a greater focus on the elderly, and Wokingham Charities United, who are largely a facilitating coordination charity operation. There's also a wider VCS group that is facilitated through Jake at CAB, and that's open to to all those that can add value, I believe, in the VCS community. And that will maybe monthly, but I think it's for them to determine their cadence and what works for them. So I guess the paper speaks for itself. It is early days. It's important. We are mobilizing and working hard on this agenda. However, this is not something we can remotely do well alone. It's absolutely essential that we make that traction with the voluntary community. We will be undertaking consultation on this early strategy to begin with with those intense conversations with the voluntary sector. Then obviously with the cross-party working group as well, and there will be a public consultation will be involved as well. So in terms of this committee, you obviously will know now your representative on the cross-party working group. You will of course be involved with the wider public consultation, and this is also saying that we'll come back as we start to implement, so you can introduce further thoughts and ideas, which of course we can then incorporate both in terms of actions but also refreshing the strategy as we go.
Thank you very much, Graham. I'm glad to see, by the way, that the Hardship Alliance is going to oversee the delivery. I'll come to Rachel first because she's actually on the group and they want to add something to what Graham has said, and then Sarah.
Thank you. I'm a bit disappointed there isn't a dedicated officer here, because particularly the question I'm going to ask is quite detailed, but we are where we are. So my question was about messaging and customer engagement and sort of language that you picked up on, Graham. Recently, there was a post on Facebook about giving out blankets to people who are cold. Now, I think that does send the wrong message, and I think if someone needs a blanket, then they should be provided with the right sort of crisis assistance and the help that they need, not a blanket. But I also understand that part of the point of that was a kind of outreach message. But then there was also a second WPC Facebook post on a similar vein, but it sort of shoehorned the climate emergency into it. So it basically was sort of, if you're cold, you can have a blanket, but also turning down your heating is great for the climate emergency. It's terrible to conflate those two issues, and I would imagine quite insulting to people who can't repeat their homes. So I guess overall, my question is whether you're able to comment on that in terms of the importance of getting of how we communicate, getting the messaging right.
Yes, I can only repeat what I've said. It is really important that the language is right, which is why there's been a lot of thought and consideration already into things like the definition, the categories, and the continual work with the voluntary sector. I can't speak about the particular Facebook post because I don't know a lot about that.
Sarah.
Thank you. A couple of different areas I want to look into. Firstly, just the scrutiny engagement bit. Happy with what's been proposed, but I'd also think this committee should be seeing a draft copy of the strategy before it goes to executive in the first place, which I understand is for April time. So maybe this could be put into our March meeting so we can actually have the opportunity to scrutinise it. That would be great, please. I wanted to ask, yes, it is disappointing that we don't actually have an officer tasked with this, but actually what's also disappointing is not having anyone from the VCS group here as well. I don't know if you're aware of this, Graham, but have you had any feedback from the VCS groups as to how they feel this process is going?
Yeah, again, I mean, maybe it was a misunderstanding. I thought this was the purpose of this paper was just to give an update and wasn't about diving into detail. To
clarify, it's not necessarily about detail, but this is supposed to be co-produced. This isn't supposed to be fully owned by the council. And I've been talking to people I know in the VCS groups, and I did hear that some of them did turn around and say that they didn't want their name associated with the strategy because they haven't been properly engaged. So what with the intention of this originally, I mean, you'll be well aware of how the Arts and Culture Alliance worked really well, where it was a jointly owned strategy by external organisations working with the council. So there's complete ownership. And when that actually went to scrutiny, a non-member of the council was actually part of presenting that. Now, we have a separate working group, and the VCS sector aren't actually, they're being consulted, but they're not actually at the table in writing and developing this. I don't understand why not.
Well, I don't know exactly what's been said to you and by who, and what specific conversations have gone on to date. All I can do is reassert the intention and check it out. That the whole purpose is to work with the VCS. The Hardship Alliance, as I described, will be the core meeting, and Jake will be running the broader VCS. So maybe there was some, initial landing. It didn't initially land as well as it was intended to, but certainly that will be the ongoing work from here, is to bring that collaboration and genuine co-production to the fore. And in future meetings, by all means, we can bring in the VCS. But like I say, this was something that was received, let's say, for whatever reason, it was received in quite late in the day in terms of us responding to this. And it's also, we're at a formative stage. So by being clearer in future when it's coming back to this meeting, and the fact that we'll be more evolved, it would certainly be beneficial, no doubt, to bring the appropriate VCS partners with us.
Thank you. And can I have your assurance that, as project sponsor for this, the VCS group will be sort of more involved in the working group and making more of an alliance so that they're actually directly involved in the writing of the strategy, please?
Yeah, that was what I thought I'd said in my response.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify. And just on some other points, the Hardship Alliance, I mean, obviously there's very brief information there. It, sounds quite positive. I just want to check you're going to ensure that there's going to be clear and an equitable way for everyone to feed into this, so that everyone involved in that, because obviously you're going to be, I'm assuming, reaching out to different groups of people from low income households, and there's going to be a process in place to ensure that it is equitable and all their voices are heard properly.
Yeah, I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but maybe if I can start by answering this. The purpose of working with the voluntary organisations is to get as much intelligence as possible in identifying genuine need, so that we get to the right people at the right time in the right way, and how their need is met as well. Of course, that's been the right way. So if that's what you meant by your question, that's the whole purpose of working so strongly with the voluntary organisations.
I guess I'm getting at the voices of the people that those voluntary organisations serve as well. So, you're going to have, children and families, you're going to have older people that are struggling, people struggling with employability, emergency hardship support, all of these different areas. And there's a clear way that all of them get their voice heard in this in an equitable way.
Yes, the Hardship Alliance is the key to coming up with the way forward. So, and all those components are represented. Yes, I mean, it's not like a voting system or anything, as far as I'm aware.
No.
It's coming together of people. Yeah.
But sometimes he who shouts loudest gets heard more, and I just want to make sure they're all represented. But I've got two other little points.
Oh, sorry, Sarah, just on that, that's what I meant was, the more we make decisions based on intelligence and facts and evidence would overcome the he or she who shouts loudest gets all, if you see what I mean. That was my purpose. It's supposed to be intelligence led as opposed to emotion led or not, vocal led.
So two other little areas. I mean, firstly, this is just a wording thing on page 4, and under the 4 sort of strategic approaches. The second one, improve the customer engagement experience. It talks about delivering one customer portal for access to support. I wanted to clarify what you mean by portal, because to me that implies technology.
Right. I think in this context, it's about the CAB playing that pivotal role.
Okay, so it's not a case of like a portal on a website or anything like that.
I'll have to come back to you on the specifics. I don't believe it's just a technological solution. It's a one front door type solution.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to clarify. Sorry, the reason why I'm asking is obviously, not everyone's going to be able to afford technology, and I wanted to make sure, because that word, gave me, alarm bells were ringing. And the other thing is, are there going to be tangible outcomes from this? Because looking at the strategic approach, I can't see at the moment the tangible aspect of this. So this is going to be measurable, smart, and we're going to, be able to really see those tangible results.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And Neil wanted to say something just now, so I'll give him a chance now.
Thank you. Just to clarify again, as Graham mentioned, this was again commissioned at fairly short notice, so it is just a high level timeline and deliverables in terms of how the strategy is produced. But as members who were here last year will recall, the committee has the power to invite whoever it wants from outside the organisation if it wanted to actually check external views as well as the views provided by officers and members within the council?
Could I ask then if this then comes back as a draft strategy to March meeting, that as well as Graham, we obviously get the responsible officer that's doing this and or multiple representatives from the VCS group, please, so that we can have a really meaningful discussion, please. Thank you.
We'll minute that, Sarah. Thank you. I've got one question. Graham, how will we inform the general public of what we're doing and how we can help those who need our help, both currently with the things that we are already doing and finally when the whole strategy goes into operation?
Yeah, I think that will be part of the work of there's all the channels we currently have, but through working with the Hardship Alliance, I think communication and intelligence being the identification of where that hardship is, are critical parts of that, and that will be the work of this group. And I guess it sort of dovetails with Sarah's point, is that these are like headings. The strategy creates a heading, and then underneath that heading will be all of the actions, and clearly this strategy will not succeed unless it has that collective intelligence and that communication that you talked about. People need to know, but it's also been very nuanced and sophisticated in that communication, because in all of this there will be those groups that are harder to reach than others. So that will be a key consideration, and therefore it's using networks as well through these voluntary organisations.
Thank you. I don't know whether Rachel or Alison want to add anything from their work on the working group. Alison?
Well, I know that in the draft anti-poverty strategy is listed in the background papers. Is it not appropriate to share that with members yet?
Graham, what's your view on that?
I don't believe there's anything written down in the state that would be very helpful to share at this stage. And
it looks very well presented to me.
Okay, go ahead then, Alison. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Pauline.
Rachel, do you want to add
sorry,
something?
can I? Sorry, just to say, just obviously anything circulated, taking the spirit of, we are currently in very active dialogue with the voluntary community. So I don't want to. I'll effectively be playing into Sarah's point, which is this is council produced and we're pushing it out there, whilst we're in dialogue, shaping it with the voluntary sector. Do you understand that point? We need to go. John, does that make sense?
Yep.
So we're currently co-producing it, and the version that Alison has will have limited co-production in it.
Okay, thank you. Rachel.
The point's been made, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for your contributions in that item. The recommendation is that we're requested to note development of the anti-poverty strategy and the timeline, and consider scrutiny input 6 months into delivery of the strategy to learn from progress to date and support development of the Year 2 action plan. I'm happy to propose that. Is there somebody that will second it?
Could I make an amendment, please?
Yeah, go on.
It was to add in about actually getting the draft strategy to come to us in March before it goes to executive as well, please.
Is there anybody in favour of that as an amendment? Or, yeah. Okay, do you want to speak to that then, Sarah?
I think I made the points in my points earlier. Ultimately, it's quite an important strategy, and it'd be good for us to scrutinise it before it goes to executive, as we do with quite a lot of stuff.
Okay. Well, I'll put that amendment to the vote, and then we'll come back to the main motion. Can I see those who would like to do what Sarah suggested and that Paul has seconded? Right. Those who do not want to do that. Okay, in that case, that's carried, and so that's what we'll do then, please. And then, given that amendment, then are you happy to support the recommendation? I see those in favour. I think that's unanimous. Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Lovely, and thank you very much for those who put the paper together in such haste, and appreciate that. Right then, let's now move to the unauthorised encampments, page 29. Is this you again, Graham? Or is it Dina?
It's me now,
Okay.
Chair.
Off you go, Dina, thank you.
So good evening, everybody. I'm here to talk to you about unauthorised encampments. Today, we're looking for just the committee to consider the actions which have been achieved and we've taken to prevent unauthorised encampments in local authority and private land within the borough, and consider the actions taken to increase the permitted gypsy roaming or travel area site provisions within the borough. My team in service took over the management of unauthorised encampments in April 2020. And within this year, we've seen a significant decrease in the amount of encampments we've got within the borough, and we've given you the figures and statistics over the last 4 years to review. I'm going to stop there and just let you ask some questions. The information's inside the report.
I personally found it quite helpful to have that bit at the end, giving the process about who does what and when. All right, then I've got Jim, Norman, Rebecca, Sam, Sarah, and Paul in that order. Jim?
Thank you. Dina, thanks to the team for the improved webs information that we asked for 18 months ago now. And I'm pleased to note the support to the private landowners, which seems to be much improved. So well done. Just on page 30, you've given us some details on, for once not being facetious. One of the reasons that Shinfield's dropped down to 0 is the fact we built on all the sites that the gypsies used to camp on. But it would be helpful if we could see the details of the sites we provided as a COVID alternative, like Mere Oak Park and Ride, because there were encampments there, but they were authorised. So have we just, for this year's figures, moved because we provided COVID sites or not? I've got a couple more if I can. Yeah.
Go ahead, Dina.
I'll give them all at once, Dina, if you're all right with that. And
I'll do my best to keep up, Jim.
Shall we do them one at a time? I think that would be more straightforward.
Do that one first, and I've got one more. Go.
Okay, so the answer is this year we haven't had any tolerated sites within inside 2021. We did have an encampment which was tolerated in 2020, which was at the Mere Oak site, and we had a short period of time when there was an encampment in 2021 in Woos Hill on a site there, which we tolerated for a short period of time. Our tolerance to that site didn't last long due to behavioural issues, but this year we've had no tolerated sites inside the Wokingham area.
It would still be useful to see those tolerated site figures if we can, because I know that Mere Oak Park was for quite a period of time.
Inside the 2020 statistics. Yeah, that's fine. I can provide them, Jim, no problem.
I've lost track of time with all the lockdowns. The last section on the borough-wide injunctions of named individuals, is May 2021 the right date for that? I thought it was known that ruling had been done, or I lost track of time again, much before that.
So no, May 2021 is the timescale of when that process went through the courts, and they made that decision that actually you can no longer have a person's unknown blanket injunction. Local authorities are now it's not allowed, unfortunately.
It was known about before, wasn't it? It was going to be.
Yeah. There was lots of conversation about it coming. We knew that there was a good chance there was a lot of local authorities that were coming under Under pressure, I'd say, about it, and obviously I think it was a local authority actually took it all the way to Court of Appeal, which is where the final decision was made, and that was made in May 2021.
Right. So if we haven't got the injunctions against named or unnamed individuals, what are we looking at to prevent that in the future? There must be something alternative we're looking at, and I will throw the last one in as well. When we first started this activity to be looked at, it was an inclusive strategy. So are we consulting with the travelling community to find out how best to satisfy both sides of this?
So that I don't believe that there is a travelling an unauthorised encampment strategy, as so to speak. We have an unauthorised encampment policy, which is around how we deal with them when they are upon our land. If there is a strategy to be done at some stage, then that would be necessary. And obviously, but what we have got is obviously our future needs programme. As far as the question around how are we going to deal with them in the future, one of the ways that we're dealing with them now is actually one of the most quickest and effective ways that we have been, which is why we're now seeing the figures and the length of time that they're able to stay within inside a borough out on any piece of land being very short, is because they pretty much are. This year we've seen them kind of arriving late evening, so just kind of dawn or dusk to a particular site, but we're able to undertake those assessments, detail whether or not it's safe for them to be there and whether or not it's somewhere we want to tolerate them, and if we don't, we're bringing in bailiffs that day and moving them on. What that's meant for us is that when they've been bounced 3 times very quickly in an area, they've gone, actually, this is too much hard work, and they're moving out of the borough. We've seen them on the peripheral edges of our borough, but they've not actually come in. And this is the first summer since I've been involved with unauthorised encampments, certainly, where we've had not one encampment over our summer holiday period. So the process that we're using now is currently effective. There is obviously some work and a wider consultation going on nationally about whether or not to make unauthorised encampments illegal. And that's a wider piece, which is the consultation is completed, but there's no outcomes showing on the government website for that at the moment. And obviously, if that does happen, then we would look to use whatever we have within inside that change of legislation to drive forward any changes at that stage.
Thank you, Gina. And that consultation has been going on for a number of years, so we might still be waiting a little longer. And thank you to you and the team for all the progress we've made. It has been good progress. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Norman?
Thank you. It's good to hear the success of the change in policy, sort of getting onto things very quickly and moving them on. I represent part of Early, and that's been particularly badly hit over the last few years, and it's good to see the numbers down significantly this year. I just wonder, I put it in a couple of ways, just what the entire reasons for the lower numbers are this year. And it's no doubt partly because of our policy to use bailiffs and move on quickly, but there does seem to be less nights spent even on private land in the area. So I just wonder if there's more to it than that. Do we know from surrounding areas what they have experienced this year? I'm just wondering, for example, if we have pushed them out to other areas, or whether this year they just didn't come for some reason, for example. Just wonder if you've got any more intelligence on that. Thank you.
Reading Borough Council have recorded on record that they have not had one day this year where they haven't had an unauthorised encampment in their borough, which I think is probably a clear statement. So we're not seeing so many in our other neighbouring boroughs, and I think that, to be fair to Reading, they have a cohort of travelling community who tend to stay inside the Reading area, and therefore they are seeing encampments and other areas are seeing them. I know Palmer Park had one for a significant length of time. And when you look at a borough such as Reading, which is still using the county court and magistrate court processes, where we are using the bailiff processes, I think you can see the difference in their encampments are lasting 10, 15 days plus, and obviously ours are significantly reduced. So I do think that we can attribute a lot of the time that we are seeing in that reduced with the amount of officer time we put into acting quickly and effectively in how we manage them. And we're also working really closely with our private landowners. So for example, we've now got a database of that we hold, and we keep a list of contact details and contacts for the private landowners, so that if there's somewhere who is being hit or who is having more than an encampment, we can go back to our database and go, okay, that land belongs to these people. We've spoken to them before, and be able to get hold of them quickly, and then be in a position where we can support them should they need to or want our support to be able to help and support that move on.
Great. I just wonder then, the groups that are in Reading, do we know of any of those that would in previous years have come to us? There seem to be especially 2 or 3 groups that were frequenting early, different groups, and I just wonder if they're now part of those in Reading.
So I think the particular group that was slightly troublesome, that we were particularly looking at for the injunction, we have not seen all of this year. I say touching wood, and we've not seen them within the borough since the end of 2020. We do sometimes get a stray across into, and early is the area, and that's normally because of boundary understanding. Sometimes they end up coming across to us, and we'll move them on and they head back into Reading. But yeah, we haven't this year seen much of the Reading group actually come across. We do sometimes see them, but I've not seen anyone coming out of Reading for at least 18 months to 2 years. The last time I saw them was Soljoel Park, actually, in Early.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca. Right, Alison.
I just wanted to ask, in the appendix, you've listed Woodford Park as being owned by the borough. That Woodford Park in Woodley is owned by Woodley Town Council.
Hang on, let me just have a look. It is, I think there's a particular part of it. I've gone off my database, if I'm honest. I think there is a particular part of it which was of where they were. It may be that somebody's recorded the particular name of the site incorrectly, more than the site. It was definitely a Woking Borough Council site. It was in the middle of COVID.
Yeah, I was just confused because you'd listed 7 on WBC land and 7 on private land, which didn't quite add up with this table. But just like to say, I think it's fantastic the borough's now giving support to town and parish councils to ensure that they can have equally prompt action to reduce disruption and disturbance and anxiety for our local residents. I just want to ask how it went at Miro with the fact that we own that site, but it's managed by Reading Borough Council. Did that mean that WBC acted, or it was Reading that took the action?
I made a decision. Well, we made a decision quite some time ago that actually we want this dealt with quickly and effectively. So we take the lead when unauthorised encampments are on that land.
And you do it very well. Thank you very much to you and all your team.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It was more a question around the stats in 2018. It looked like that there was a big jump from 17 to 41. Was there any particular reason why that happened?
I'm gonna fall slightly here and say I wasn't involved back then, unfortunately. It was a particular time, but what I would say is that it was 2019. I'm just trying to get to this data there. So in 2019 was when we started using bailiff appointments. It wasn't a time when I was personally involved, so it's very difficult for me to give any particular detail to that because I wasn't close enough to the data at that stage. But what I would say is, when I talk about a particularly troublesome cohort, we saw them a lot during 2019. There is also, which I'm sure Jim will tell you about, a particular piece of land which is mentioned within inside the Appendix 1, up at, where is it? I bet Jim can name it for me straight away. Which is the Auto Trader site at Danes Hill, which was a private piece of land, which the landowner was waiting for development on, and he was not keen to move a traveller encampment on, and it stayed in situ on that site for some significant months in 2019, which is which had a big impact on the data and figures. They actually used that site on several occasions during that summer, during that year.
Thank you, Gina.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you very much. I wanted to pick up on the Miro site because we've had a report, had this a couple of times before come to this committee, and we talked about needing a transit site, and actually you've picked up, it's been mentioned in here as well, it's been picked up that a transit site comprising 5 pitches is required. Now, the last meeting we had, I think we were all under the impression, it's July 2020 actually, I made a note of the minutes, it was confirmed that a tolerated stopping site had been operated at Mere Oak in partnership with Reading Borough Council. Discussions were ongoing about the future of this site. Longer term options were also under consideration. And obviously providing that transit site was something that I didn't see anything about in this paper. What is going on with that?
So it wasn't a transit site, it was a tolerated site during COVID, and that may have been poor wording on behalf of the last report that was here. It was a tolerated site. So if we had an encampment in the area, Mere Oak was a space which we had identified as during COVID, that we could say to the travelling community, you can go to this area, we'll provide you toilets and water, and this is a safe place for you to go. It was never an intention that is a long-term plan. It was a short-term offer during the height of COVID, and it isn't something which is now currently in place.
Okay, we were told in July 2020 that longer term options to make it into a transit site were being discussed, and that is minuted. And I remember that happening. So I was quite surprised not to see anything in this report. So where is this transit site of 5 pitches going to be?
If I'm honest, that is not something I know is actually, there is actually a decision on where it will be at the moment, or if there is a particular site being identified for it, Sarah.
Is there still a commitment to provide it though, somewhere in the borough?
So there is inside the report, obviously, information about the intention to want to provide it, but I do not believe at this stage that there is a site identified to do so.
Okay, right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you. Most of my questions have been actually asked, but I've got a couple remaining. With the decrease in numbers, do you think there's actually better protection of these vulnerable sites now taking place?
Yes, obviously, when we came to you in, I think originally this time, I think this is the 3rd time the report's been here. The first time there was a list of sites which we were looking at as needing some protection done on that, and a lot of that work was done. And if you look at Appendix 1 again, and you look at the different areas that we're seeing people, that actually we're not seeing a lot of repeat sites, or sites where we have got repeat have not seen an encampment since, for example, 2016. So what the measurements which have been made on the sites that we saw of the report last time, a lot of them we're not seeing repeat sites of, apart from the likes of Mere Oak, unfortunately.
Okay, if that's everything, then let's move back to page 29. The recommendation that we are to consider the actions that have been achieved and are being taken to prevent unauthorised encampments on local authority and private land within the borough, and consider the actions taken to increase permitted Gypsy Roma and traveller site provision within the borough. Jim?
Was it possible to add a thank you to that for the fact that we've actually made some really good progress on this?
I'd be delighted to add that, and I'll accept that as an amendment as someone who was about to say I'll propose that motion. So would you like to give me some words?
Just that we recognise the good work and the progress made in this area by the officers.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that, including the amendment? Thank you, several. Rachel, I'll take. Do I see those in favour of that recommendation, including the amendment? Thank you very much. That's well voted. Well, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Lovely. Thank you, Dina, and for all your knowledge and all of your work as well. Thanks very much.
Thank you. See you later. Bye now.
Bye-bye. Right, then we now moved to the bus services one, on page 41. It's a quite detailed report, even though it's only a few pages. The summary in particular is quite detailed. So is Pauline going to do us a presentation?
I'm not going to do your presentation, Pauline. I was just going to introduce it and introduce Rebecca, who has done a huge amount of work on this and which we're very grateful for because she's done a really good job. This was done at very high speed, meeting some very, very tough government guidelines in terms of the dates. If we hadn't done it in time, we would have lost all of our bus services improvement grants and we would have lost all of our COVID funding as well. So Rebecca's done a sterling job. And of course, Andy, sorry, to get this report over the line in time. This is the first report of many. You can see the timeline towards the end of the recommendations. The next stage of agreeing an enhanced partnership is to draft and gain legal approval for the enhanced partnership. There'll then be a statutory objection period where the bus services can object to anything we recommend. Then it will go to consultation, but it has to go to executive approval by March. And if we don't get it to executive approval by March, again, we run the risk of losing the funding. It's a very, very detailed document. So really, we've brought it to you. I mean, Rebecca probably is the best placed person to describe it in any detail, but we brought it to you for any ideas and discussion.
Thank you, Pauline, and well done, Rebecca, the speed with which you put it together. Do you want to make any comments, Rebecca?
You're mute.
Oh, sorry. The report basically follows government guidelines and was a result of the National Bus Strategy. So it is quite detailed, but that's because the guidance asked for quite a lot of detail to be put in.
Any questions or comments? Then Norman and Paul and Rochelle. Norman.
Yeah, I mean, since it was all done very quickly, I'm assuming that the bus companies are all keen to engage in this. Are they all responding appropriately? I guess they are.
As part of this process, we actually had the managing directors of the various big bus companies in to talk to them and ask them what their future strategies were. And we'll be seeing their proposals at a later date, and we'll be able to see what they're thinking because they can propose things as well. Sorry, Rebecca.
I completely agree. They're all on board and they've certainly all been willing to work with us to date.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thank you very much. I agree with what Pauline said. The government has set ridiculous timescales to get this sort of information together. And the officer's done very, very well to actually pull this together to get this completed by 31st of October. It needs to be very detailed and there's a lot more work still to be done. in a very short space of time. The recommendation 3, I can't really see how the committee would have sufficient information without officer input to be able to demonstrate how that could be put together. So I think that's quite difficult. It's almost like a DFT requirement.
That's exactly what it's like, Paul. What I was trying to avoid was
yes,
a large mountain of I want a bus coming to my door, which would possibly fund.
Yeah, but I think I can't see how the committee could actually come up with that particular side because we don't have that information. We'd need officer support on that. I've got some further questions. On page 42, 43, the targets which the BSIP looks to achieve, it says an 8% reduction across all key corridors and urban corridors combined by 2024-25. What 8% reduction are you looking at?
Journey time, I think. Is that right, Rebecca? You're muted again.
Yes, it is. It's based on journey time, average journey times throughout the day across the number of corridors listed in the BSIP.
Might be a good idea to actually amend the report to say that, just in case people think it's an 8% reduction in buses or passengers. Or... Well,
it could be anything, Pauline.
It could be. Exactly.
Hence why I asked the question. We don't want an 8% reduction in passengers.
No.
No.
The ones below. The 99.65 and 3 million, etc. What baseline is that being worked from? Is it 2018 data?
It's in the actual report. It is
the information right at the very back on a page 58 or 60 or something.
In terms of the targets.
There's a link to a very long document in bullet 1.
It
yes,
is.
I've read all of it, Pauline.
Oh, it's not a bad read, actually, is it?
It's 2018-19 baseline data.
Yeah. So it is. It'd be useful to have that at the front as well to say what baseline you're working from.
Yeah.
On page 44, you're stating one option is to limit the number of roadworks on a particular corridor within a given period. How would that work when you've got emergencies as well?
You can't apply it to emergencies. That is one of the things the DFT do note, that emergency works have to happen. It's more applied to planned works.
And we do have the ability to, and we are doing at the moment, designating more routes as traffic sensitive routes, which will make us able to be more sensitive about where the roadworks are planned and potentially push them overnight and that sort of thing to get them out of the way. And that will help buses the same as every other bit of traffic.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. Oh, sorry, page 45. Mid-February 2022 executive process. Would that include a report to this committee after the consultation to enable us to scrutinise the EP and the scheme before it goes to executive?
I don't know. I think it might be a bit tight again. I mean, the timescales that we've been given for this are ridiculous. I can't promise, Paul, but if we've got something in a position that we can bring it, we will.
I think it'd be most helpful for us to scrutinise it. I can see your timescales are very, very tight because of what government's put in place, because you need it by the 31st of March. But I think it'd be very useful for us to actually see that.
If we can, we will, but I'm not promising.
Fair enough. Thank you very much. Guy, I have seen your hand up, so I'll come to you in a moment. Rochelle?
I've got more, Pauline, so I'll come back.
Why don't you keep going while you're on the phone?
Just don't steal all of mine.
Go on, Paul. Keep going.
Shall I carry on?
Yes.
Okay. What the figure 2.7 on page 16, this is the bus services improvement plan report. It clearly indicates a lack of south to north routes, and where they actually do operate, they finish around 1800, so woefully too short. for anybody who's working or is going out in the evening. That's an area that really does need to be strengthened, evening services, particularly down some of the key corridors and on those north-south links. What can you do to address that?
I agree with you. Particularly one of the points we made in the BSIP, I think somewhere, was about Winnish Triangle and the fact that the bus services there finish around about 6 o'clock, which means that they're pretty useless for commuters who just can't get to and from Winnish Triangle and spend a working day away with the current bus service. There's a limit to what we can do because with commercial bus services, they're down to the operator. We can try and negotiate better services. We've set out quite clearly the improvements that we want. But in the end, if they're commercial services, we don't have control over them. And we currently can't operate our own bus service. And the subsidised services, we can only subsidise what we've got the money for. And that's sort of connected to the BSIP bid. Is that right, Rebecca?
That is correct, yes.
I was also considering the Twyford to Wokingham link,
Yeah, no, I
1
agree.
to 8.
I agree.
That finishes at 6 o'clock. So if you're working in central London and you're coming out from Paddington and you stop there, you've missed the bus service.
Yeah, we've
and the bus services are pretty poor in it, and that shows in one of your surveys that was done, where hardly anybody uses a bus service to get to that particular station. Hence why there's so many people drive to it.
Yeah, and where there's not enough parking either, which makes it worse. Yeah, we've been looking at whether we can link park and rides up to improve the service to Twyford, but again, all subject to what we can get bus subsidy to do and what we can make pay and what we can get the bus services to do.
Yeah, because you've mentioned working with Winnish Triangle Business Park and linking that Winnish Triangle Park and Ride up to Twyford, which would enhance that corridor as well.
Yeah, that's
so
exactly
that could get a double win on that.
Yeah.
I'm a regular bus user, but what I have found coming from Winnish, using the 4 or X4, I can't actually utilise the 1 to 8 if I get a return ticket, because despite they're both owned by Reading Borough Council, one's Reading buses and the other one's Thames Valley buses, and they don't integrate their ticket.
Yeah, so that's one of the aspirations.
That is something
that's
got to be looked at.
That's in the BSIP already. That's one of the things that we want is interoperability and interlining of tickets.
On page 17, it states you're going to develop a route along the A329M. I'm not quite sure what you're looking at there.
That's the Park and Ride Express routes. They would link the Park and Ride, so you would have a route between Bracknell and Copper Beach and Winnish Triangle, Thames Valley Park and into Reading. So you've got reverse flow from Reading to Thames Valley Park, Reading to Winnish Triangle. You'd have the flows from Copper Beach into Winnish Triangle Business Park, and then the Copper Beach into Bracknell as well.
Okay, not sure how that will really work.
Well, it does already to a certain extent. There is an A329 bus, isn't there? A329M bus.
Yeah, it's the 300. It's the 500.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, going from Copper Beach to Park and Ride, the other Park and Ride, Winnish Triangle. Do you want to ask Rochelle now, and I'll come back?
Okay, thank you, Rochelle. Have we learned from some of our mistakes so far by not doing the Park and Ride during the pandemic when we could have, when there was very low bus service, and now we have the Park and Ride being temporarily discontinued till the construction is finished, or putting up bus stops in some of the new SDLs, but no bus service whatsoever. And or looking at some of the smaller estates like in Winnish, Hatchwood Mill, which has no bus service whatsoever and no one within the normal location. And we've proposed things such as extending a bus from Early that would touch into Hatchwood Mill as well. But we're not getting bus service going to places that people want to go. And you can't get across from one part of the borough to the other. You can't go, as Paul said, you can't go north-south. You can go east. You can go from Reading towards Bracknell, but there's not much service going anyplace else. And if you want to go from Arborfield to Twyford, forget it. You have to go all the way into Woking and then go all the way out again. That doesn't make much sense.
Before Rebecca does the detail on this one, I'll remind you of the third bullet, which is we can't just have a pick and mix selection of buses that people want to put on. They need to either be commercial or they need to be subsidised. And we've got a limited amount of money that we can subsidise them with. So if they're going to be commercial and if, as you say, people want to use them, then we should be able to attract bus operators to develop those services. But if they aren't going to be used and they aren't going to be commercial, then we can't afford to subsidise every bus service to every area. It's just not feasible. We'd have to take money out of somewhere else in the council, and we don't have that money.
So we actually won't get the bus service to work if we can't actually get them to ride the buses. And we can't ride the buses unless we have the money to do it, and we can't have, and nobody will ride them if there's no buses. So it's kind of a bad combination.
Well, we seed fund buses through developer funding. For instance, the bus that was recently stopped because it wasn't popular enough that went to Tesco's, but we can't fund them forever. And the issue we've got is that if people don't use them, we can't keep them going unless the bus operator can get to run them commercially. I'd also say Hatchwood Mill, there is actually a station in Winnish, which obviously competes with the bus service. So it's obviously more difficult to get bus services to make money in Winnish when you've got a railway station as well. Sorry, Rebecca. Detailed questions.
We have 2 railway stations in Winnish, by the way.
I know you do.
I would say on Hatchwood Mill, that one was agreed quite some time ago, over 10 years ago, I believe, the Section 106, and there wasn't any Section 106 associated with that site. If you look at some of the strategic development areas now, they do have Section 106 agreed for them, quite significant sums for bus services. What we have to be very careful of is when they're introduced. If you put a bus service in too early, you're going to start incurring cost when you don't have very many residents there. If you haven't got residents, you're not going to generate that onboard revenue. If you can't generate the revenue, you can't cover the costs, and then you don't have your bus service for very long. It's very much about timing. And what has delayed things at the moment is that we have been hit quite severely by COVID. We're now at a recovery of about 65% of pre-COVID passengers. At one time, it was really on the floor. We had less than 20% of passengers travelling. If we'd have put bus services in as those residents had just moved in, then we would have been spending an awful lot of money for nobody to be travelling and no revenue, and we would have run out of money very, very quickly. So we do need to keep a watching brief on it and see when it is appropriate to bring them in. But there is funding there to pump prime bus services for those strategic development areas. In terms of bus stops going in and the infrastructure, our preferred way of working with that is for us to take Section 106 contribution from the developer and do them ourselves. In some cases, developers have said, no, we will do the infrastructure, and they've put them in before the bus services are on the ground. But we've certainly, our preferred approach is for us to lead the way and take a coordinated approach with the bus service and the infrastructure aligned through a strategy.
Okay, let's
answer the park and ride one.
Sorry.
Can we move on very quickly now, please? Have you finished, Rochelle? Okay, Jim.
Thank you. I'll try to be quick. I'm not a bus expert, so these might be naive questions. On the corridors, have we got a plan to make sure that the corridors can cross-pollinate each other I'm talking specifically about the A33 Spencerswood 3 Mile Cross Reading and the Wokingham, Finch Hampstead, Arborfield, Chinfield. If those two crossed or touched at some point, you suddenly open up a whole set of residents that can go to Wokingham as a choice rather than to simply go to Reading. Because I know on page, one of the other pages, I've lost it now, page 46, that over 50% of our services terminate in Reading or open up Reading. I think there's an opportunity there by ensuring two corridors touch that people can then get to Wokingham as a preference.
Yes, the Shinfield bus service strategy does look at the A33 service coming down through the development there and travelling in orbital route. So that goes down the A33 through the new development, then back up through the A327. So you have got that cross-pollination there.
And that's with single ticket, coming back to Paul's point, I hope, or transferable tickets.
Yes,
And just one last thing, thank you guys for producing this report in such short timescales, because it's certainly very detailed and very well laid out.
Thank you.
Guy.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of my questions got asked and answered already, so that's always what happens in my case. But I do echo the commendations that everyone has said so far in regards to getting this done so quickly. The highlighting of because I went and looked at the draft proposal document, the bus improvement plan from my Wokingham, and the big anomaly you can see if you look at the network, especially in regards to the buses per hour. Trying to remember where I found it now on the particular link, is that there is very, very little support for Twyford, especially with Crosswell coming. So I reinforced the comments to basically make that if we can work with our partners to try and get something that is a little more logical. But I am well aware of the fact that we are limited by what we can do. The idea of linking up the park and rides as a express service, I think that is an excellent idea. And right now we just need to get support for those that do commute a bit more logical in where we are. Effectively, if we can create some core corridors and focus on that and try and get everyone within the major urban areas and the core corridors on some of the more rural areas to basically be within walking distance of a bus route, that would be good. The other point I'd like to raise is, have the bus companies been working, have we been working with the bus companies, should I say, in regards to the type of buses that are being used? Because I know that some patterns have changed. There's also, I've flicked through the report, and correct me if I didn't see it, but was there any comment about basically more greener buses anywhere in the report? I can see Rebecca's nodding, so I must have just been glazing over when I was reading it at about the other day. So I apologise if I missed that. And that's basically it from me. I'm certain, I know this was originally due to come to community and corporate, but due to the timescales, we've had to look at it. So I'm in a rather unusual position of asking the questions as opposed to having everyone ask them for me.
Rebecca, do you want to come back on
that? Sorry, which question am I coming back on?
There are more comments, to be perfectly for other questions, because most of my questions got asked and I was just reiterating them.
Right, thank you. And this Rebecca.
Thank you. We're all kind of talking about the areas in which we stand as members, because obviously these are the key points that are of real interest to us. So representing Finch Hampstead and the developments going on around there and out to Arborfield, these routes are really key with our lack of public transport, as we all know. And we've been kind of promised on and off for quite a long period of time about extra bus services. And I understand everything that you're saying about our limitations. But moving forward, I sit on the Gorse Right steering group, And one thing I've picked up from that is, we have in the future a lot of housing coming on board there. And we're going to have people living within Finchampstead Village that are from maybe not able to use cars, will need to use public transport as well. And just how will they be considered within this scheme, looking kind of moving forward about how we can look at their needs as well, because we've got lots of different residents with different needs, and I know that particular group is really keen to get involved with this.
Any comment?
I certainly have a meeting in my diary already, the Gorse Ride development, so we certainly will be engaging. I'm not familiar with it at the moment, so I don't know the types of numbers we're talking, the types, the dwellings, but we'd certainly look to engage through the planning and through the community groups as well. It reminds me of something I did a few years back with Norries, and we went in and we spoke to the community in terms of what types of usage patterns they had, where they were travelling to, and drilling down into the types of trips that they made. And once you have that understanding, you can start to build something that is reflective of that, because I can put something on, but it doesn't mean it will be the right thing for the community. But we also need to be mindful, we need the funding to support that. It may be that the existing service is the right service for them. It may be a tweak is and there's something better, or we could work with the bus company to achieve that, or it may be that we need to look for some funding elsewhere, or we may be limited by what we have. But until I understand what the needs are, I can't really say much more than that at the moment.
No, but I think that's adequate. The fact that we are actually going to consult with these groups is really important, because they do have a key voice, and you're going to do that. So it's good to hear that you've got that appointment coming up. So I look forward to, I'm sure I'll get feedback from the Gorse Ride steering group on how that goes. So thank you.
And Rebecca's very good at working with the bus companies to actually get something that is viable as well.
Yeah, and I mean, we're aware, Pauline, as you know, in Finchampstead of the issues with non-viable bus routes. And I've actually, when I've spoken at the Gorse Ride steering group, it's very key to that these routes have to be sustainable. We can't fund them, and it's making realistic expectations for the group as well of what we can provide for the residents, what we can do. So I think it's good that it's important that we engage.
Yeah, you don't do anybody any favours if you put a bus service on that you then pull out later because it's not viable and you can't afford to.
No, and we've had that happen already. So, but we understand the limitations, and I think it's key that the groups know these limitations. But it's really good that you're engaging with them, because they are really important members of our community that are eventually going to be living with us.
They're a good bunch.
Yeah.
Could I just pick up the point that 2 or 3 people have made, and that's the importance of buses linking with stations, so that people who commute can use the trains, not the cars. And can I link that with it's page 46, the second box, where it talks about working closely with neighbouring local authorities. I'm going to be a bit parish pump here, but I think what I'm saying is typical of other areas, such as Finchampstead and Rebecca's area. There's a lot of people in Finchampstead and where I live would like to catch a bus to the train and commute that way, but there is no bus. I think there's about 2 buses a day, and they don't link up with the station, the train times. So I'm fully aware of the commercial needs of the bus companies, and that they can't run without making a profit. But just over the border in Bracknell, the Transport Road Research Laboratory site is about, well, they're halfway through the building, but they will have about 1,000 new houses there. And I understand that through 106 money, they are going to put a bus through that estate. So I wonder if Rebecca could have a conversation with Bracknell Forest Borough Council and the bus companies to ask whether they could align any buses that to go through that area with Crowthorne Station and perhaps do a round trip through Finchampstead as well. So I'm sure it would be very popular with people. They're always trying to lobby me about it. When can we have a bus to the station? And I do understand about getting them to link up with train times, but at least could you have that conversation with Bracknell? Thank you. And Paul, you've got your question back.
Thank you very much. Yeah, a couple more. On page 26, it states for services into and around town centres, bus fares must be attractive compared to town centre car parking charges, which I fully agree with. Therefore, are car parking charges being looked at during this period to ensure the bus is the most competitive? My second question really related to that is then making tickets attractive and affordable, for being integrated tickets, which I spoke about previously. Would you look at group travel, family travel, when they travel together? So you've got a family of 4, 2 adults, 2 children, to make that an attractive ticket as opposed to people travelling in the car. Because if my wife and I travel from Winnersh into Wokingham Town Centre as a return, it would be £4.60. Okay. So if it was a group travel, 2 people, 3 people, 4 people, could we make that far more attractive? Could that be looked at?
I think I'll take the bus versus parking one first. Yes, we'll always look at the cost of parking and the cost of buses. We've always got a balancing act between keeping the town centres, and I mean all of the town centres, not just Wokingham, viable and the shops viable, but also making sure that the parking is a sensible price and benchmarked against other towns in the area, and that we're not attracting people into our car parks in order to sort of driving into our car parks in order to get cheap parking to get a train, for example. So yeah, I do get your point. We will continue to look at it, but we do have to balance those various different and sometimes contradictory objectives. Do you want to answer the other one, Rebecca, which is about?
Yes, group travel. Yes, we're happy to pick that up with the bus operators. I believe Reading buses do already offer a group travel ticket where you can have up to 4 people travelling for a more attractive price than buying single or return tickets. And certainly on the Park and Ride, there are group travel tickets, but I believe it's across network as well.
Did you want to add anything about Pauline's point about Bracknell?
In terms of the Bracknell one, we've done quite a lot of work with Bracknell and with GWR, and both have funding which could potentially help with that. The difficulty, I think I've put 2 or 3 proposals to Councillor Bowring, and the difficulties we have are there are very specific times being requested in terms of wait times at the station at Crowthorne, and we also need to link with the train times at Wokingham Station. And you've got half-hourly service at the moment. To get the Pacific waiting times at Crowthorne, which have been requested, means you can't connect with the trains at Wokingham as efficiently into London. So it's a choice between one or the other, because the train is quicker than the bus between the 2 stations. So yes, we can do some more work on it, but I think we need to work out where our priorities are and which ones we want to connect with as our top priority.
Thank you for that, Rebecca. I don't think we need a bus that goes into Wokingham Station. I mean, it's not really on the same route, or shouldn't be on the same route. It should be just going to Crowthorne Station. So that if they could be separated, that might help. But
sounds like a separate conversation afterwards, actually, doesn't it?
Mm. Anyway, can I say thank? Paul has one more question.
I've got more, if that's
One
okay.
more, only one.
Oh, can I have 2? The first one is page 28, Plus Bus. Currently, you've got Wokingham Plus Bus, and there's one in Reading as well. But the Wokingham one doesn't cover Winnersh and Winnersh Triangle stations. And if that was extended to cover that, then people coming up from at, say, the Guildford area on the North Downs line could then use the plus bus to get to Winners Triangle without going onto the train or a separate bus, so they've got more of a continuous journey. So it's extending that plus bus area, which I think would be most helpful. The other is for Twyford, having a plus bus in Twyford, and if that could extend down towards Winnersh and Winners Triangle, that would also be beneficial, I think, because it would be working two ways. Just a comment on the mobile apps. I think they work really well, really well for Reading buses and Thames Valley. Page 34, early station. The existing footbridge, and Andy knows all about this one, is structurally now getting to the end of its life. It's not DDA compliant. This is the best opportunity in the next 50 years plus to get this right and to have DDA compliant ramps onto that bridge and
So
also onto the station itself. It's a one-off opportunity.
So this is not the subject of this meeting. This is about the bus service improvement plan, not about a railway bridge.
Yeah,
However,
I do agree, Pauline, but it is in the report about it.
The bridge at the moment, even if it was ramped, would not be DDA compliant because it only serves one of the two platforms. So more work ongoing on that one, and we're working with the local members at the moment.
Okay, then I think that's everything. And can I thank very much Pauline and Rebecca and Andy for coming tonight and answering the questions in such detailed ways. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
And now that we move to agenda item 54. Recommendation. Oh, I'm sorry, we haven't done the recommendation. Beg your pardon. I'm carried away with excitement. Page 41, to review the local bus service improvement plan, review the information in this report on an enhanced partnership agreement, and make suggestions on what Woking Borough Council's enhanced partnership agreement with local bus operators should consider so that the desired BSIP outcomes are achieved. I think we've probably done that, and that's really in the minutes. So don't think we need to add any words there.
Could I thank the committee for their input? It was useful.
Thank you very much, Pauline. Paul, is this absolutely essential?
Yeah, I'd just like it minuted that we'd like the report to come back before it goes to executive, so we can scrutinise the EP and scheme.
Is that possible, Pauline, in the timescales?
I don't know yet. It depends. As I've said twice already, we'll bring it back if we can, but we can't bring it back if it's not ready.
So if we say the report to be brought back to scrutiny committee,
if possible,
if possible,
yeah. I'm happy to commit to bring it if it's possible.
Yeah, but I understand if it's not possible.
Poor Rebecca's got enough to do, I think, to get it done.
Yes, I'm happy to include that then, Paul. So given that I won't read out all of the rest of the words, you can all read. So is everybody happy with that recommendation? Anyone against? Lovely, that's great. Thanks ever so much, and thanks again for all the work you're putting into this. It's a subject that matters to a lot of us.
It matters to us as well. Thanks.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye. Right, then the executive forward programme, page 47. Going over the pages. Any comments on any of that? Page 50. Right, and then the draft work programmes for our management committee, page 52 and onwards. Sarah?
Yeah, it's just obviously we need to now get the anti-poverty strategy in on the March agenda. And the other question is the Q3 performance management report isn't listed. And obviously by January, February, March time we're into Q4. And I'm wondering if Neil can maybe chase officers as to which month we're going to get it in, so the information we're receiving is still relevant. Please, thank you.
Yes, this is something that we're always going on about, isn't it? The relevance, and I know that Bill is working on it, but Neil, do you have an answer to Sarah's question?
Yes,
What is it?
I will check and make sure we get the correct date in the work programme.
Thank you very much. Thanks for raising that, Sarah. It's so frustrating getting this data so late, but I think that is being worked on. Okay, anything else on our work programme? Children's Services, Norman, any comments? Or was that all happy?
Not really, just that we've now got a pretty full programme. We went through all the reports and strategies that we're expecting over the next period of time, and therefore we've now got a pretty full agenda. It goes stretches right through for, well, you've only shown the next 3 meetings here, but actually we've got a baseline programme that goes right through to the end of next year now.
Yeah. We always used in these meetings to have a report on the schools that were not meeting expectations. Is that still on the agendas? And it was always a part 2 item, and the local ward councillors were invited to the meeting as well.
Yes, it is still an item. During COVID, there weren't so much direct interventions into schools, so it's less applicable, but it's certainly coming back on the agenda now.
Super. And the other thing, which obviously you've gone off the agenda because there haven't been any, is the reports on Ofsteds. Not the whole report, but just the executive summary, so that people know what's happening in their own schools. That could come back on, that would be great. Thank you. Moving on then to corporate and community, or community and corporate. Guy, any comments on that programme? Again, very full one.
Yeah, well, when isn't it? There has been some changes since publication on that. So we basically the arts and culture strategy update has been postponed from December until May, basically to allow some additional events, etc., to take place. So that's going to be taken forward into the new municipal year. January is now basically looking at updated enforcement and building control in March for March, and we've also got, it's been suggested that children's services ONS, basically, so we can have an item from the section of their domestic abuse reports, and basically how that contract works for children in domestic abuse as well. So that's a bit of ongoing work in there. We've now got an in-house item as well in January, focusing on the customer journey experience within the organisation. So effectively, how when a not a customer, that is completely the wrong term, when a resident basically is doing something with the council, whether it's filing a report, looking for support, etc., how is that journey mapped and controlled, and basically where is, for lack of a better description, a chain of ownership and responsibility? Because right now there are aspects where we basically make a report and it seems to disappear into the ether. So we're looking into that. And as always, the budget process is going on swimmingly. I thank Alison for chairing the meeting the other week, which I had to sadly not attend, because the advantage of having school-aged children, and they bring home all the colds and sickness with them. So we had a lovely case of norovirus going through the household, so I was not well enough to attend on that particular one. But the work on the budget continues at a pace, and next meeting next week, providing I'm not locked in this room for the next 2 weeks until I get a negative PCR test, we're looking at the budget again. We will be looking at overgrown pavements, and then we'll be looking at some other aspects on the work programme. So yeah, as always, lots of work to do in community and corporate.
Super, thank you very much indeed, Guy, and let's hope you don't actually get COVID.
I've got it booked now, so hopefully I'll find out by Friday into Saturday.
Good. Okay, then moving on to the health scrutiny. Alison?
Okay, thanks, Pauline. I think we are doing a great job ramping up the pressure on the CCG. We've had them in twice. Once we had an extra meeting to examine the COVID booster and vaccination programs, and then most recently to talk about GP practice provision and services. Because as we're all aware, the nationwide patient satisfaction survey, whilst it had 5 practices in the top 10%, which is fantastic for our evidence, we also had 4 practices in this borough in the bottom 10%. And I'm sure all of my colleagues here, when they're out on the doorsteps and talking to their own residents, that they often get complaints about some of our GP practices. And why is it that some of them are so amazing and some of them are struggling? So we were very much pushing the CCG to be giving one-to-one support, working more closely with them. We're expecting to hear something quite soon about that, hopefully on a positive note. The next meeting of HOSC is on the 19th of January. We've got a big programme, so we've put in an extraordinary meeting on the 21st of May. We'll be looking at the potential changes to the Optalis service, public toilet provision across the borough, maternity services, and we put this onto the programme because Health Watch, in one of their surveys, unfortunately, I don't think anybody had a good word to say about the maternity services, which is shocking. So we decided that's something we should specifically look at the Royal Berkshire Hospital. We're also looking at the continence service because we've got concerns about the waiting lists for that. And the new thing that we've been doing, HOSC, since I became chair, is taking the key KPIs from the audit committee and looking at those for adult social care within HOSC. So we'll be doing that. And then, of course, we've got Health Watch. So we've got a lot of things was for January, and some of them will be moving to February, which very much depending on presenter availability. So I can't confirm right now which are January and which are February. As ever, anybody who's not on HOSC is always very welcome to join us on Teams. And if you've got questions that you would like a member to ask, please contact any member or myself, and we're happy to do that. And of course, we do have members' questions at the beginning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. Very interesting and enlightening what you're doing there. Thank you. And then let's move to agenda item 56, the last one, the action tracker. I've got a question. I think Sarah implied something about earlier in the meeting, and that's regular meetings with executive and CLT as per the executive scrutiny protocol. Is that, Neil, the ones where I'm supposed to meet with CLT and the executive? Because I have not had any meetings yet with them. So what's happening there?
Yes, they are the same meetings, and yes, they haven't happened yet. But I will be, once the peer review process is out the way, I'll be contacting the chief executive to try and get some of these meetings up and running.
Well, I've been waiting for over a year. No, it's not your fault, but please could put a bomb behind them, please. Thank you. Sarah.
Yeah, that's one of the points I was going to make, which is what I raised last time. The other thing I was just going to pick out is under the 20th of January 2021 actions, under the COVID response, the third bullet point, add 2 new work programme items, green recovery and new ways of working, update completed. This is sort of what I was alluding to earlier in the recovery strategy, that we have actually requested some specifics come out of that already, nearly a year ago, when we haven't had them. So when are we going to get them? I mean, I know that you don't have the answer, Neil, but I just wanted to highlight that this has been on a request that we've had for some time now, and so we still haven't had it. Cheers.
Any comment, Neil?
Yes, I will chase those 2 up. I think Graham alluded to some of it earlier on, but we, as you said, we've asked for a specific report.
Super. Thank you. Anything else for anybody else? Okay. In which case, can I thank you all for your contributions, all very, very positive this evening. I think it's been a very useful meeting. So thanks very much for coming, and I declare the meeting closed.
Thank you, Chair.